They thought they could erase me with a signature. That one little line on a fake medical report meant to prove I'd lost my mind was supposed to be the end. They planned it all. Gaslight me, isolate me, and quietly take everything I built. My home, my legacy, my name. But I didn't survive 63 winters and bury the love of my life just to be written off like an expired coupon. This isn't a revenge story, it's a resurrection. So if you're watching this, sit tight, because what you're about to hear is how a so-called crazy old lady outsmarted a professional manipulator, uncovered a string of elder abuse crimes across 3 states, and saved her only son from the woman who nearly destroyed him. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just watched. And waited, and then I moved first. I moved. The chandeliers glistened like frozen stars above the grand ballroom, and white roses cascaded from every corner as if the entire space had been dipped in a dream. Elaine Walker stood just beyond the curve of a marble pillar, clutching her champagne flute like it was an anchor. At 63, she had mastered the art of smiling through grief, through disappointment, through betrayal, but nothing prepared her for what she overheard tonight. We just need 1 or 2 more incidents. Confusion, maybe she forgets a name in public. Once we have it on paper, she's gone. Rachel's voice floated over the floral arrangements, light and crisp, like she was talking about a brunch menu. Her maid of honor giggled, then whispered, "Are you sure that's not too extreme?" Elaine's had minor episodes before. Nathan told me she forgot his birthday last year, Rachel replied with a smug sip of her drink. All we need is a little nudge. Then she's out, and the beach house is ours. The beach house? The one Robert, Elaine's late husband, had poured their savings into. The one with driftwood walls and windows that sang when the wind rolled off the ocean. The place where Nathan learned to swim, where they'd scattered Robert's ashes just 6 years ago. Elaine felt her lungs tighten, but her face didn't flinch. Not yet. She turned, stepping back into the crowd, weaving between sequined gowns and rented tuxedos with the grace of a ghost. Rachel caught her eye across the room and waved. Too enthusiastically, too polished. Elaine returned the gesture, lips curling into what the world would read as pride, warmth, love. But inside, a storm had begun to form. She made her way to the bar, asked for a neat whiskey, something sharp, unforgiving, and leaned into the burn as it traced fire down her throat. Years ago, when Nathan had fallen into a depression after Robert's sudden heart attack, it was Elaine who sat beside him every night, coaxing him to eat, holding his hand during therapy, reading him passages from his father's journals. She'd fought like hell to keep that boy breathing, hopeful. Then Rachel appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, beautiful, poised, endlessly attentive. She was the kind of woman who complimented your teacups while subtly rearranging them when she thought you weren't looking. From day one, she knew how to make people feel seen, even when she was already planning their obsolescence. "I'm so lucky to be joining this family," Rachel had told Elaine during their 3rd dinner together, her eyes bright with sincerity. "You and Nathan have such a strong bond. I just hope I can fit in." Elaine had smiled and nodded, masking the flicker of unease in her gut. It wasn't what Rachel said, it was how she said it. There was a studied perfection to every move, every word, like someone auditioning for a role she'd already memorized. Over the months, Rachel embedded herself like ivy, slow, suffocating, and deceptively pretty. She started managing Nathan's calendar, planning family dinners that didn't include Elaine, suggesting that maybe his Sunday check-ins were a bit much for a grown man. And Elaine, ever the peacemaker, let it slide. She thought, if Nathan is happy, I'll adjust. She thought, this too shall pass. But now, hearing those words, she's gone. The beach house is ours. Was like watching a match fall onto decades of dry timber. Elaine set her glass down, the clink louder than she meant. A waiter flinched. "Sorry," she murmured. But she wasn't sorry. She was done being sorry. She scanned the room, watched Nathan laugh with Rachel's father near the chocolate fountain. Her son looked happy, but happiness built on lies didn't last. She thought of the moment Rachel had insisted Elaine come with her to a cute little clinic for a memory test. Just for fun, Rachel had said. It'll give us peace of mind. Elaine hadn't seen the harm. But now, that test was part of the plan, a record, a seed planted months ago. Her son had no idea he was being used, or maybe he did, and didn't care. Either way, the veil had been lifted. Elaine stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air slicing through her skin like clarity. Music played inside, muffled now by layers of French doors and false promises. She pulled out her phone, opened the voice memo app, and began to speak. Her voice steady, low, measured. If anything happens to me, if I'm hospitalized or declared unfit, please listen to this. My name is Elaine Walker. I'm of sound mind, and tonight at my son's wedding, I overheard my new daughter-in-law, Rachel Myers, outlining a plan to have me committed to gain access to my property. She cited a past memory test as evidence and intends to push further incidents to establish incompetence. She paused, then added, "This is not paranoia. This is preparation." She hit save and smiled. The game had begun. Elaine re-entered the ballroom with the elegance of a seasoned performer. Every smile was measured, every nod carefully delivered like a toast. She walked table to table, hugging distant relatives, complimenting dresses, accepting congratulations with hands that didn't tremble. Inside, though, her mind was a battlefield, sharp, focused, and suddenly awake in ways it hadn't been for years. She spotted Nathan near the dance floor, his head thrown back in laughter at something Rachel whispered into his ear. For a fleeting moment, she saw the boy he used to be, the one who built pillow forts and carried a stuffed elephant everywhere until the age of 10. Then he turned, met her eyes, and looked away. Elaine smiled harder. She was halfway through congratulating Rachel's aunt when a voice from behind her whispered, "Elaine Walker? I thought that was you." Turning, she saw a woman with graying curls, a flash of recognition in her hazel eyes. Elaine couldn't place her immediately. "It's me, Fran Whitaker. Fran Hudson before I married. We were in book club together back in '95. Elaine's polite smile turned genuine. "Fran, of course, you haven't aged a day." Fran chuckled and leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Listen, this might be a bit odd, but that girl, Rachel, is she your daughter-in-law?" Elaine blinked, alarm bells quietly beginning to chime. "Yes, she just married my son tonight." Fran's expression tightened. "Elaine, I don't want to cause trouble, but my uncle knew her about 2 years ago. She was seeing him, helping him organize his affairs," she said. "He was 78. Elaine's smile began to freeze. Fran continued, "She was charming. Knew exactly what to say, how to act, got real close to him, convinced him to sign over power of attorney. A few months later, he had a mental episode and ended up in a memory care facility. He barely recognized me at that point. Rachel disappeared." Elaine's breath stalled. "His lawyer said she vanished the day after he signed the deed to his house over," Fran whispered. "We couldn't do anything legally. He didn't remember any of it. And she was never on paper as anything but a friend." "Are you certain it was Rachel?" Fran nodded. "Same voice, same face, different hair color." Elaine thanked her quietly, politely, then excused herself once again. She drifted through the room like fog, silent, deliberate, and suddenly everything clicked. The subtle way Rachel always helped with documents. That time, she'd offered to go with Elaine to update her will, just to make it easier. The way she had insisted on helping Elaine digitize her investment accounts. The scone brunch, where she'd innocently suggested consolidating bank accounts just to simplify things for Nathan. And the memory test. Elaine returned to her table and picked up her phone. She didn't text. She didn't call. She simply began to review her notes. Emails, old appointment confirmations, receipts. Little things she'd never thrown away, bits and pieces that, in isolation, meant nothing. But together, they painted a picture, and it wasn't pretty. She thought back to when Rachel first joined their lives, how Nathan had grown distant almost overnight. Sunday lunches became, maybe next week. Their shared book discussions faded. He started deferring to Rachel in every conversation, checking with her before answering even simple questions. And the most telling moment of all, when Rachel had offered, no, insisted, to help Elaine renew her savings certificate. "It's confusing with all the banking jargon. Let me help you." She'd even filled out part of the paperwork herself. Elaine had felt vaguely uncomfortable at the time, but grateful for the assistance. Now she felt nauseated. Rachel had been laying groundwork from the beginning, slowly, methodically, carefully. Elaine excused herself early, claiming fatigue. She kissed Nathan's cheek, ignoring how he flinched at her touch, and smiled at Rachel, who chirped, "Sleep well, Mom," as if nothing had happened, as if she weren't planning to have her mother-in-law legally silenced and institutionalized. The drive home was quiet. Elaine kept the radio off, the windows shut, her thoughts loud. That night, she didn't sleep. She opened an old leather journal, the one Robert had given her on their 20th anniversary. The first pages were filled with his cursive script, love notes, small sketches. After his death, she'd stopped writing in it, until now. Page after page, she detailed everything: dates, conversations, expressions, tone. She wrote down Rachel's comment at the wedding, Fran's story, her own suspicions, the bank visit, the memory test, Nathan's emotional shift, Rachel's helpful gestures. Each entry was a puzzle piece. She didn't know what picture they formed yet, but she intended to find out, and she wasn't going to lose another night of sleep to doubt. The weeks following the wedding passed in a strange fog, a mixture of artificial pleasantries and growing tension. Elaine kept her mask on, smiled during phone calls, accepted lunch cancellations with grace, and responded to Rachel's texts with polite emojis. But beneath that exterior, she moved like a shadow, watching, listening, noting everything. It started subtly. Nathan and Rachel officially moved into Elaine's investment property, a 3-bedroom craftsman house she'd purchased 3 years earlier. The plan had always been to flip it or rent it out, but when Nathan lost his job, she'd offered it to him rent-free as a temporary solution. Temporary had become permanent. Rachel had redecorated immediately. The neutral tones Elaine chose were replaced with stark whites, angular furniture, and an array of Himalayan salt lamps that Rachel insisted were for energy balance. Elaine had smiled and said nothing. She noticed, though, that the utility bills had stopped arriving. At brunch one Sunday, one she hadn't been invited to but attended anyway after accidentally showing up near their house, Rachel had greeted her with faux surprise and open arms. "Elaine? What a lovely surprise. Come in, we were just talking about you." Elaine didn't believe that for a second. As she stepped inside, she noticed the artwork on the walls was new. So was the TV, the sleek espresso machine, the faint scent of lavender oil. "Nathan's doing a freelance tech contract," Rachel said over mimosas, as if answering a question Elaine hadn't asked. "And I'm finally launching my wellness coaching platform. Busy, busy." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "That's wonderful. Just curious, have we discussed a timeline for contributing to the mortgage?" Rachel's face didn't change, but her eyes cooled a fraction. Nathan shifted in his chair. "We've been meaning to bring that up," Rachel said lightly. "It's just that with all the initial investments, equipment, branding, consultants, it's been tight. But once we stabilize, we absolutely want to contribute." Elaine didn't nod, didn't smile. She just stared. "And speaking of stabilizing," Rachel added, "I was wondering, would you consider adding Nathan's name to your savings account? You know, just for convenience. Emergencies, transfers." Elaine's laugh was quick and sharp. "No." Rachel blinked. "Oh, of course. Just an idea." Later that week, Nathan stopped by Elaine's house. Alone for once. He was different, less polished, more tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he fidgeted with his keys like he didn't know why he was holding them. "Hey, Mom," he said as she poured them tea. "Rachel told me you were upset about the mortgage stuff." "I'm not upset," Elaine replied, passing him a cup. "I'm observant." Nathan didn't respond immediately. Then, out of nowhere, he muttered, "She just doesn't want you stressing, you know? Especially with your history. Elaine stilled. What history? Nathan sipped his tea. I don't know, Rachel said you've got that record from the neurology clinic, the memory test. So she's just trying to protect you from stress triggers. Elaine placed her cup down carefully. You think I'm mentally unstable? No, Mom, it's not like that. It's just, Rachel said it's better to be cautious in case anything escalates. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. Nathan, she said softly, do you know why I went to that clinic? He hesitated. Rachel said it was your idea. Elaine nodded slowly. Interesting. That night, she drove to the clinic herself. They still had her file, but something was off. The intake form had multiple entries, some that weren't hers. The appointment summaries were oddly phrased, suggesting mild cognitive lapses and early onset confusion, even though Elaine remembered answering everything correctly. Then she found it, a note signed electronically by a caregiver, Rachel Myers. The next page documented a recommendation for follow-up, one that had never reached Elaine. Her hands trembled as she turned the final page. There it was, an official notation that the patient showed early indicators of decline. It wasn't a diagnosis, but it was enough to plant doubt, enough to file for guardianship, enough to ruin someone. Elaine stepped out of the clinic into the cold evening air and stared at the horizon. The sky was bleeding red over the hills, the last light of the sun dipping behind dark silhouettes. Rachel had planned this for longer than she thought, and Elaine was done playing nice. 2 days after leaving the neurology clinic, Elaine walked into the office of Jonathan Marks, her family attorney of nearly 2 decades. The room hadn't changed. Books lined the walls, awards gathered dust behind glass, and Jonathan still wore suspenders like it was 1982. But Elaine had changed. I need both properties liquidated, she said as soon as she sat down. Quietly, fast, no delays. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Yes, the beach house and the Maple Street property. I want clean titles, minimal exposure, no real estate agents with loose lips. Jonathan set his pen down. I assume this is connected to the Rachel situation. Elaine gave him a tight smile. She's good, John. She's very good. She won't be the first to try, he muttered, opening a file drawer, but I doubt she knows who she's dealing with. Elaine appreciated the sentiment, but her instincts warned her otherwise. Rachel wasn't just opportunistic. She was practiced. They went through the paperwork carefully. Elaine insisted everything be mailed to a P.O. box she had just opened and that any electronic communication be encrypted. Jonathan promised discretion. By the end of the meeting, the wheels were in motion, but Rachel was already 2 steps ahead. That night, Elaine noticed something odd, an email in her inbox confirming a change to her backup recovery email. She hadn't made one. Her stomach dropped. She called her provider immediately and discovered that someone had requested a password reset just hours after she left Jonathan's office. She changed everything, locked every account, added 2-factor authentication. But the damage was done. Rachel knew. Within a week, neighbors began calling. Elaine, I hate to ask, but are you okay? Is it true you've been having memory issues? I heard you accused Rachel of spying on you, that you think she works for the government? Elaine felt her throat close each time. Rachel was poisoning the well. She'd always been polite to the neighbors, offering them herbs from her garden, organizing potlucks, waving from the porch. Now, those same people were watching her like a cracked teacup. At the grocery store, the cashier asked, "Do you need help with the pin again today, Ms. Walker?" in a voice too sweet, too rehearsed. Elaine nodded calmly. No, thank you. That evening, she made another appointment, but not with a lawyer, with an investigator. Claire Donovan didn't look like a typical detective. She had short curls, navy nails, and a soft, measured voice, but her eyes were razor sharp. Elaine invited her for coffee under the pretense of discussing elder care resources for a friend. Claire listened quietly as Elaine described a woman I know whose daughter-in-law might be manipulating her. I think she's slowly trying to isolate her. Elaine said carefully, getting her declared incompetent maybe. Not overtly, very subtle. Little lies. Withholding bills. Fake concern. A memory test here. A suggestion there. Claire tilted her head. And this friend, does she have assets? 2 homes, Elaine replied. One worth over $2 million. The other maybe $500,000. Claire took a slow sip of her coffee. Has your friend seen changes in how her family treats her? Elaine nodded. Her son used to call every Sunday. Now it's once a month, and only to ask for money. Claire's face didn't move, but something in her posture shifted. This isn't the first time I've heard something like this, she said. There's a pattern. Predatory behavior disguised as caregiving. Hard to prove, even harder to prosecute. Elaine leaned forward. But if someone were gathering proof? Claire met her eyes directly. Then I'd tell them, keep going, but be careful. If she's as experienced as you say, she knows how to make people like your friend look unstable. All it takes is one incident, one confused moment, one exaggerated story. Elaine nodded slowly. So, it's a long game. Yes, Claire said, and your friend will need allies who can see past the act. But if she can gather documentation, dates, names, behavior patterns, we may be able to build something. Elaine reached into her purse and slid a small notebook across the table. She already started. Claire smiled faintly and tucked the notebook into her briefcase. Then tell your friend, she said softly. She's not alone. That night, Elaine sat on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the wind twist through the trees. Rachel had declared war in whispers and rumors. Elaine would respond with facts, dates, evidence. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't lash out. She would wait. And when the time came, she would strike. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning, glossy and impersonal, planted firmly in the manicured lawn of the Maple Street house. It stood there like a challenge, a bold red-lettered warning that change was coming, whether anyone liked it or not. By noon, Elaine's phone rang. It was Nathan. "You're selling the house?" he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. "You didn't even tell us?" "I didn't think it was necessary," Elaine replied evenly. "It's my property. You've been living there for over a year without contributing." "It's our home now, Mom." Elaine paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Then you should have bought it." She hung up before he could speak again. Later that day, Nathan showed up at her door, red-faced and furious. Rachel was with him, wrapped in a cream cardigan, eyes wide with exaggerated shock. "I don't understand," Rachel said, her voice trembling just enough to draw sympathy from any passerby. "You said we had time. We've been trying so hard, launching my business, helping Nathan stabilize his income." Elaine cut her off with a raised hand. "I said nothing about permanence. You've been here over a year, rent-free. You've made no effort to honor the financial arrangement." Nathan jumped in. "You never said we needed to sign anything." Elaine reached into a drawer beside the front door and pulled out a manila folder. She handed it to him silently. Inside was a rental agreement, signed, dated, and notarized. Nathan paled. "I thought this was just a formality," he mumbled. "You said it was just paperwork for insurance purposes." "All paperwork is just paperwork until someone stops paying their dues," Elaine said. "You haven't paid a cent." Rachel moved closer to Nathan, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sweetheart, it's okay. We'll talk to our lawyer." Elaine smiled. "Please do." And they did. Rachel's lawyer, young, confident, overpriced, sent a letter within days claiming emotional distress, requesting a delay in the sale, and vaguely referencing unfit mental behavior from Elaine. Elaine sent back a single document, her title deed, followed by proof of the signed lease, followed by a notarized letter from her financial advisor stating her mental competence and long-term planning acumen. The reply came swiftly. They had no case. Rachel's carefully laid plan was slipping, but Elaine knew better than to gloat. Instead, she dug deeper. She needed more than legal wins. She needed understanding. She needed to know why someone like Rachel did what she did, how she moved from victim to victim, how no one ever seemed able to stop her until it was too late. She started with records, public databases, property transfers, elder care organizations. But it wasn't until she visited an assisted living facility under the guise of researching care options for a friend that she stumbled into something more. It was a modest place on the edge of town, clean but clinical. Elaine toured the common rooms, observed the residents. Most were cheerful. A few were withdrawn. Then she saw her. A woman in her late 70s, skin pale against thinning silver hair. She sat alone near the window, holding a photo frame, lips moving soundlessly. Something about her tugged at Elaine's memory. She approached slowly, gently. "Hello, mind if I sit here?" The woman didn't respond at first. Then she turned, eyes clouded but not empty. "Do I know you?" Elaine smiled. "I don't think so, but I'm trying to remember someone. A caregiver named Rachel. Young, blonde, very helpful. She used to work in senior support services." The woman's hand trembled slightly. "Rachel," she whispered. "She helped me with my will, said I needed protection from my nephew." Elaine leaned in, heart thudding. "And did she?" "She was so nice," the woman murmured. "Told me my nephew only wanted my house. She handled the lawyer meetings for me. After that, everything got foggy. I moved here. Haven't seen him since." Elaine blinked back the burn of tears. "What's your name?" "Lucille," the woman said. "Lucille Waverly." Elaine nodded slowly, committing every detail to memory. Rachel had done this before, and if Elaine had her way, she was about to do it for the last time. Elaine returned to the care facility the next day, this time with a bouquet of lavender and chamomile, Lucille's favorites, according to the nurse. The older woman smiled when she saw her, eyes clearer today, voice a touch steadier. They sat by the window again, watching the wind stir the garden outside. Elaine gently placed a small digital recorder on the table, discreetly hidden beneath her scarf. "Lucille," she said softly, "would you mind telling me again about Rachel? I want to make sure I remember it right, for my friend." Lucille hesitated, then nodded slowly. "She came every Wednesday, always smiling, told me my nephew was dangerous, said he'd lie to the courts, take everything. I was scared." Elaine listened without interrupting, heart pounding as Lucille recounted the meetings, the signatures, the day her car was sold for her own safety. "She said I'd thank her one day," Lucille finished, voice breaking. "But I haven't seen my nephew since. Haven't seen my house. I don't remember where it is anymore." Elaine gently squeezed her hand. "You've helped more than you know." She left the home with the recording safely tucked away, along with a copy of Lucille's medical timeline and care notes, which the sympathetic nurse had accidentally left in the printer tray. That night, as Elaine reviewed the audio file, her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. She checked the peephole. It was Rachel. Tears streamed down her face, mascara smudged, hair pulled into a messy bun that did little to hide the panic in her eyes. Nathan stood beside her, arms crossed, face tense. Elaine opened the door slowly. "Elaine?" Rachel sobbed before she could say a word. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening to me. I'm under so much pressure. You put up the house, and Nathan's been stressed, and I snapped." Elaine said nothing. Rachel clutched her chest. "I know you think I'm this terrible person. I know you think I'm after your money, but I love your son. I just want us to be a family. Can't we fix this?" Her voice broke, and she collapsed to her knees, right there on the porch. Nathan looked stunned. "Mom, come on," he said, his tone accusatory. "She's clearly upset. You didn't need to sell the house. We could have figured something out." Elaine studied her son's face, so familiar and yet so distant now. He saw pain and bought it at face value. He didn't see the performance. Not yet. "I never wanted things to be this way," Elaine said quietly. "But sometimes the truth doesn't surface until people start digging." Rachel looked up, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Nathan asked. Elaine smiled faintly. I mean, everything is about to become very clear. She helped Rachel to her feet, handed her a tissue, and watched them both walk back to their car. Rachel clung to Nathan like a lifeline, throwing one last pleading glance over her shoulder. Elaine didn't wave. She went inside and opened her laptop. She uploaded the recording of Lucille. She scanned the care notes. She attached the lease documents, the forged neurology file, the fake caregiver signature. Then she wrote, Claire, this is what I've found so far. Let me know if it's enough. E. She hit send. Less than 24 hours later, Claire responded, Elaine, we need to meet. What you found opens a door. I've already flagged 3 previous cases tied to Rachel under different last names, Wells, Martinez, and Danner. Each involved an elderly person. Each involved accusations of cognitive decline and transfer of assets. 2 ended in lawsuits. 1 settled quietly. I'm requesting access to sealed files in Nevada. We might be looking at a pattern. Claire Elaine leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the message. A pattern. It had a name now, and Rachel Myers, whatever her real name might be, was about to be caught in it. It began with footsteps on gravel. Elaine had just poured her morning coffee when she heard them. 4 distinct sets, slow and deliberate, crunching along her driveway. She glanced through the front window and froze. Rachel, Nathan, a man in a gray suit carrying a leather briefcase, and a woman in scrubs. Her hand tightened around the coffee mug. So this was it, the intervention. She had prepared for this moment, replayed it in her mind like a chess sequence. Still, seeing it unfold in real time sent a ripple through her chest. Not fear, but focus. Rachel was the first to smile. Elaine, she said gently, we're worried about you. Elaine opened the door without a word. Nathan stepped forward, eyes darting nervously. Mom, can we come in? Just to talk. The man in the suit introduced himself. Dr. Franklin, I'm a licensed psychiatrist. Your family requested an informal evaluation just to make sure everything's okay. The woman in scrubs gave a soft nod. I'm Nurse Laura. We're just here to support, not accuse. Elaine's gaze swept over them like a slow breeze. She stepped aside and gestured them in. Rachel led the group into the living room, where the late morning light poured through the bay windows, illuminating dust motes like tiny alarms. Dr. Franklin cleared his throat. Elaine, we've received some concerning reports about changes in your behavior. Forgetfulness, paranoia, erratic decisions. I see, Elaine replied calmly. From whom? Rachel's voice cracked slightly, well rehearsed. From people who care. People who want what's best for you. Elaine didn't answer. Instead, she motioned to the couch. Would you all like to sit? As they arranged themselves, Rachel pulled out her phone. I don't want to do this, she said, eyes welling with crocodile tears, but I recorded something just to show what I mean. She hit play. Elaine's own voice filled the room, distorted and fragmented. They're watching. Trust no one. Poison in the tea. The clips were disjointed, spliced from conversations taken out of context. In one, she was clearly quoting an old detective novel she'd been reading. In another, she'd been joking with the mailman. But strung together, they painted a disturbing picture. Nathan looked away. Elaine let out a soft gasp. She clutched the arm of the chair, eyes wide, playing the part. I didn't say those things like that. It's okay, Rachel said. Voice velvet-wrapped steel. You're under stress. That's why we're here. Dr. Franklin leaned forward, folding his hands. Elaine, this isn't an evaluation for commitment. This is just a conversation. But if we determine that a brief observation period would benefit your safety, we may suggest a 72-hour inpatient stay. Elaine nodded slowly, still playing confused. May I use the restroom first? The doctor hesitated. Rachel stood up quickly. I'll go with you, just to make sure you're... Elaine cut her off with a sweet, brittle smile. I believe I can find my way to the toilet, dear, unless you think I'll drown myself in the sink. Rachel blinked. Elaine didn't wait for an answer. She closed the bathroom door behind her, locked it, and pulled out her phone. 2 texts. 1 to Jonathan. Step 2. They're here. Lawyer needed immediately, record everything. The other to Claire. They're trying the intervention, playing tapes. Fabricated, Plan B activated. She flushed the toilet for realism, splashed cold water on her face, then stared at her reflection in the mirror. Time to act like prey. Just long enough. When she returned, everyone stood. Rachel was holding a clipboard. If you agree, we can check you in this afternoon. Elaine blinked. That quickly? We've reserved a room just in case, Dr. Franklin said, at Serenity Springs. It's a comfortable place. Quiet, private, and ideal for assessments. Elaine's fingers twitched. Serenity Springs. The same place Lucille was sent after Rachel's interference. The same place her nephew never visited again. Okay, Elaine whispered. I'll go. Rachel exhaled like she'd won. She even reached out to pat Elaine's arm. Elaine let her. As Nurse Laura stepped forward to offer support, Elaine waved her off and went to gather her bag. She packed slowly, deliberately. One book, a journal, a change of clothes, her medication, which she had already verified wasn't tampered with, and a manila folder marked recipes that contained duplicates of every document she had sent to Claire. Then she added a voice recorder, switched on. They didn't check her bag. On the drive to the facility, Rachel kept making small talk. Nathan sat quietly in the back seat beside Elaine, staring at his hands. I'm doing this for you, Mom, he muttered once. Elaine nodded but said nothing. As they pulled into the gated entrance of Serenity Springs, Elaine caught sight of something in the rear-view mirror. A black SUV parked on the opposite side of the street. Jonathan's car. He was already here. As the gates closed behind them, Elaine felt a strange calm settle over her. Let the storm come. She was ready. The halls of Serenity Springs were painted in muted pastels, the kind meant to soothe rather than comfort. Elaine was escorted to a modest room with white walls, a single bed, and a view of a koi pond she doubted was real. The nurse smiled as she handed her a basic schedule of activities. Yoga at 10, art therapy at 2, lights out by 9. Elaine smiled in return, then forgot the schedule on purpose. She had no intention of participating in finger painting or guided breathing. What she needed was information, and a way to observe how these professionals responded to patients who weren't quite what they seemed. So she played her part. She mumbled to herself in the cafeteria line, repeated questions, paused mid-sentence like she forgot what she was saying. Nothing dramatic, just enough to let them draw their own conclusions. Within 48 hours, a note appeared in her file. Possible early-stage cognitive decline. Recommend monitoring for mood variants. Perfect. On her third morning during a group Remember Your Childhood session, Elaine met Marion. Marion was 79, sharp-eyed and full of quiet fury. They connected over a disagreement about the lyrics to an old Patsy Cline song. Marion insisted it was crazy for trying, and Elaine agreed, though the rest of the group thought otherwise. After the session, Marion whispered, "You're not like them. Your mind's still sharp." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Neither is yours." That night, they sat side by side on the patio during free time. The wind stirred the hedges, and Marion lit a contraband peppermint under her tongue. "My son's girlfriend put me in here," Marion said flatly. "Said I was forgetting things, started with little tests. What did you eat yesterday? What's today's date?" Then she started talking to the doctors directly. Elaine stiffened. "What was her name?" "Rachel. Rachel something. Blonde. Pretty teeth. Too perfect." Elaine nearly dropped her tea. "She was helping with his finances," Marion continued. "Helping with mine, too. Told me it was safer if we consolidated. I signed a few things, then I was here. My son hasn't visited in 9 months." Elaine reached into her sweater and pulled out the tiny voice recorder hidden in a stitched seam. She clicked it on. "Would you be willing to say all that again?" she asked. Marion smiled sadly. "Thought you'd never ask." For the next hour, they traded stories like currency. Names, dates, details. Marion remembered Rachel using another last name back then. "Wells," she said, or Welch. Something with a W. Elaine wrote it all down in a spiral notebook. That night, she folded the notes and Marion's recording into an envelope. addressed it to Claire Donovan, and handed it to Nurse Angela under the guise of a letter to my niece. Angela, who had seen through Elaine's act almost immediately, nodded once and tucked it into her scrubs. Elaine knew it was risky. But she also knew that the clock was ticking. Rachel would not wait forever. If the mental health system didn't bury her first, a legal maneuver just might. 2 days later, Elaine was summoned to the facility's social worker office. There was no appointment on the schedule. She walked in cautiously. Claire sat in the chair beside the desk, dressed in civilian clothes, eyes sharp. Elaine sat down slowly. That was fast. I moved things up, Claire said, voice low. Your letter was thorough and heartbreaking. Elaine didn't blink. Did you find them? Claire nodded. 3 confirmed victims, all elderly, all declared mentally unfit within months of interacting with Rachel, each time under a different name. In 2 cases, she assisted with legal paperwork under the guise of being a caregiver or consultant. In the 3rd, she hesitated. Elaine leaned in. What? Claire's voice dropped further. In the 3rd case, the victim, Margaret Thornfield, passed away in a mental institution 3 months after Rachel submitted her initial assessment. The family didn't contest. They believed the diagnosis. Rachel was the last person she saw outside staff. Elaine felt the air leave her lungs. And the son? She asked. Estranged. Contacted her once, then vanished. We're still trying to reach him. Elaine closed her eyes for a moment. This ends with me. No, Claire said, standing. This ends because of you. They agreed on the next steps. Surveillance, evidence collection, a formal file with local and federal agencies. Claire would build the paper trail. Elaine would stay where she was, safe. For now. But not silent. Elaine returned home from Serenity Springs on a Thursday afternoon, just as the sun dipped low enough to bathe the kitchen in honey-colored light. She took her time walking through each room, straightening a photo frame here, running her hand across the old oak banister there. Everything was exactly as she left it, except now she wasn't the same woman who walked out. By the weekend, word had spread. The doctors had declared her fit. No signs of cognitive decline, no further observation needed. Case closed. Rachel texted within hours. So glad you're feeling better, Elaine. Let us know if you want company. Elaine waited 2 days. Then she replied, How about dinner? Just the 3 of us, like old times. Let's start fresh. Rachel responded with heart emojis and an exclamation point. Nathan followed up with, Sounds great, Mom. Elaine set the table for 3. She prepared roasted chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes with garlic, and a bottle of Merlot she pretended not to know was Rachel's favorite. Everything was intentional. Everything mattered. Outside, 2 cars sat quietly in the cul-de-sac. One belonged to Jonathan Marks, her lawyer, the other to Claire Donovan, and 2 plainclothes officers who sat sipping coffee, waiting for a signal. At precisely 6:57 p.m., the doorbell rang. Rachel arrived first, wrapped in silk and sincerity. Nathan trailed behind, clutching a bottle of cheap wine and looking uncomfortable. Elaine greeted them with warmth that wasn't quite false, but not entirely real either. We missed you, Rachel said, embracing her like nothing had happened. You look amazing. Freedom suits me, Elaine replied. They sat, clinked glasses, and made small talk. Nathan asked about the facility. Rachel gushed about her business, almost breaking even. They all laughed when Elaine accidentally dropped a spoon. Halfway through the second course, Rachel leaned back and raised her glass. I have to say, Elaine, she said, swirling the wine like a connoisseur, you surprised me. I thought for sure you'd dig your heels in, but you let go. Elaine smiled politely. Let go of what? Rachel laughed. Control, I guess. I mean, come on. You've always had to manage everything. The finances, Nathan, even the beach house. I used to joke with him that if you ever got a dog, it would need to sign a prenup. Nathan chuckled nervously. Rach. She waved him off. No, it's fine. We're family now. No more secrets, right? Elaine tilted her head. No more. Rachel leaned in. Besides, I've always believed that some people are just better at making decisions, especially when others, can't. Elaine's eyes didn't move from Rachel's face. Can't? Or won't? Rachel shrugged. Call it intuition. You see someone floundering, you help. It's not manipulation, it's mercy. Elaine leaned forward slightly. And you've done that before? Helped others make decisions they couldn't? Rachel raised her glass again. Once or twice? Elaine reached under the table, pressed a button, and said softly, Once or twice? Rachel didn't notice the shift. Oh, come on, she said. What would Lucille have done with that crumbling old house? Or Margaret? She thought her cat was her husband. These people needed help. I gave it to them. No one else stepped up. Nathan froze. Elaine didn't blink. And what about me? Rachel's lips curled. I was going to take care of you too. She didn't see Elaine's fingers curl around the small device taped beneath the table, recording every word. Outside, in the parked car, Claire adjusted her earpiece. We've got her, she whispered. Rachel reached for her glass again, still basking in the warmth of her own confession, when the front door creaked open. At first, she didn't notice. But Nathan turned, startled. Elaine remained still, her hands folded on the table. Claire stepped into the dining room, flanked by 2 officers. She was calm, composed, her badge already visible. Rachel's wine glass stopped midair. What is this? She asked, voice suddenly brittle. Claire's eyes locked on her. Rachel Myers, also known as Rachel Wells, Rachel Martinez, and Rachel Danner. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, financial fraud, and falsifying medical evaluations with the intent to control the assets of vulnerable adults. Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted from Claire to Nathan to Elaine, then back again. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious, she said, standing abruptly. This is insane. Sit down, one of the officers said firmly. Rachel backed up instead, knocking over her chair. I haven't done anything wrong. Claire stepped forward, her voice steady but electric. Margaret Thornfield, Lucille Waverly, Marion Chen. Their files all link back to you, and you know the part that makes this personal? She pulled something from her jacket pocket, a photo worn at the edges, and slammed it onto the table. This is my sister, Marion. You remember her? The one you convinced was losing her mind. The one you isolated from her son until she stopped recognizing her own name? Rachel froze. Elaine felt Nathan's breath hitch beside her. You're her sister? He whispered. Claire didn't answer him. She kept her eyes on Rachel. You messed with the wrong family. Rachel turned toward Nathan. Sweetheart, this is a mistake. Tell them I would never. But Nathan didn't look at her. He looked at Elaine, and then at the recorder still blinking silently under the table. I heard it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything. He stumbled backward, collapsing into his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him up. I didn't know, he muttered. God, I didn't know. Rachel's hands were shaking now. You don't believe her, do you? She's trying to destroy us. She's been manipulating you since the beginning. Elaine stood, slow and deliberate. No, Rachel, she said softly. You've been manipulating him. The officers moved in. One read Rachel her rights as they cuffed her. The other stood between her and the table just in case. Rachel didn't fight. She looked at Elaine with eyes full of venom and fear. You think this makes you the hero? She spat. You think he's going to forgive you for this? Elaine didn't flinch. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about truth. They led Rachel out the front door, her protests fading with every step. The street was quiet, the porch light casting long shadows against the driveway. When the door closed, silence filled the room like fog. Nathan didn't speak. He just sat, staring into the space Rachel had occupied moments before. Elaine walked around the table and knelt beside him. I'm so sorry, he said, tears slipping down his face. I should have seen it. I let her use me. Elaine placed a hand on his. Mothers don't keep score, Nathan, she said quietly. We just survive the storms. He looked at her, eyes red. I don't deserve your forgiveness." She pulled him into an embrace. "I'm not giving you forgiveness," she whispered. "I'm giving you a second chance." The trial didn't take long. Rachel's record, once scattered across states and aliases, had finally been woven into a coherent timeline of deception, fraud, and exploitation. With the testimonies of victims, some in court, others via video, and the mountain of evidence gathered by Elaine and Claire, the outcome was inevitable. She pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence, 5 years in federal prison. Restitution orders were added, but Elaine knew most victims would never see a dime. Still, justice, however imperfect, had finally caught up to Rachel Myers, if that was even her real name. Elaine didn't attend the sentencing hearing. She didn't need to. By then, she was already gone. Gone from Maple Street, gone from the house Rachel had tried to steal through whispers and paperwork. Gone from the manicured lies that once defined her every day. She moved to a modest oceanfront condo an hour away, a quiet place with white walls, creaky floors, and windows that welcomed the salt-heavy breeze. The building was older than her last home, the neighbors less nosy, the decor entirely her own. There was no grand announcement, no celebration, just silence and peace. Each morning, she walked the shoreline with a thermos of coffee. She collected shells without caring if they matched. Sometimes she read mystery novels on the balcony until the light faded and the stars emerged one by one. Freedom, she discovered, wasn't always loud. Nathan called once a week, sometimes twice. He had started seeing a therapist, a quiet man who didn't judge, who helped him unravel the threads Rachel had tied around his neck. He'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment near his new job in data logistics. The work was steady, the pay decent, and for the first time in years, he didn't flinch at the sight of overdue bills. Elaine didn't ask for apologies anymore. She didn't need to. They met for dinner once a month, usually at a seaside cafe halfway between their homes. The first few meals were awkward, filled with too many pauses and too few laughs. But slowly, as the months passed, the rhythm returned. Not the same rhythm, a new one. It was better. He asked about her book club. She asked about his progress in therapy. They both avoided the word Rachel, though sometimes her shadow lingered between bites of grilled fish and sips of white wine. One evening, after their 5th dinner, Nathan reached across the table. "I don't think I ever said thank you," he said. Elaine smiled. "You don't have to. I want to." She squeezed his hand. "Then I'll accept it." And that was enough. Weeks later, Claire called. Elaine was on the balcony, sipping tea, watching the waves roll in when the phone buzzed. "Wanted to give you an update," Claire said. Elaine straightened in her chair. "I'm listening." "Marion, my sister, she's getting better. Slowly. She remembers more now. The therapy is working, and the facility agreed to release her early. We're moving her to a private home next month." Elaine exhaled, smiling. "That's wonderful, Claire." "There's more," Claire continued. "Lucille, remember her?" "Of course." "She's been granted restitution. The court forced a freeze on Rachel's assets. Some of it came from shell accounts, traceable now. Lucille's getting part of her house value back. Not everything, but enough to matter." Elaine nodded. "I'm glad." Claire hesitated. "One other survivor. Margaret Thornfield's sister. She's still in the facility. We tried reaching her last week. She doesn't recognize anyone. The damage, mental and emotional, it's deep." Elaine closed her eyes. "Some people walk out with scars," she said. "Others never walk out at all." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You helped stop it." "No," Elaine replied softly. "I helped survive it." They ended the call not with goodbyes, but with a shared understanding. Some victories don't need trumpets. Some are whispered on the wind. Later that night, Elaine sat at her kitchen table, flipping through an old journal, the one she used during the investigation. Pages of notes, dates, observations, evidence. At the back was a single page, blank, except for a sentence she had written weeks before. "Being a mother doesn't mean being silent." She added a second line beneath it. "Being strong doesn't always mean being loud." She closed the journal. Then she poured herself another cup of tea and walked to the window. The tide was coming in, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't brace herself for what it might take away. The message arrived just after midnight. Elaine's phone buzzed softly on her nightstand, dragging her from the edge of sleep. She rubbed her eyes, expecting a spam alert or perhaps a calendar reminder she'd forgotten to cancel. But what she saw made her sit up straight. "Hi, I'm sorry to reach out like this. My name is Lila Chen. I got your number from Detective Claire Donovan. I think my stepmother is doing something to my dad. Something like what happened to you. Could we talk?" Elaine stared at the screen, heart suddenly too aware of its own rhythm. It had been months since Rachel was sentenced, since the last whispers of deception had faded from her life. She had walked away from that storm with scars, yes, but she'd found peace in their patterns. And yet, here was another storm, knocking gently at her door. She tapped out a reply. "Of course, Lila, I'm here. When would you like to talk?" They arranged a call the next morning. Lila sounded young, early 20s at most. Her voice trembled with urgency, but her words were careful, practiced. "My dad remarried 2 years ago," she began, "after Mom died. At first, Vanessa was wonderful, thoughtful, nurturing. She helped Dad get organized, pushed him to eat better, exercise, even got him a new wardrobe." Elaine murmured, "Sounds familiar." Lila caught the hint. "That's what scares me. A year ago, Dad stopped calling me as much. He canceled our lunch dates, said he was too tired, or Vanessa already had plans. Then she moved him to a new financial advisor, got him to consolidate accounts. I didn't even know until the bank called me, confused why I wasn't listed as his emergency contact anymore. Did you ask him about it?" "I tried. He brushed it off, said he was just simplifying things. But lately, he's been forgetting things. Like really basic stuff. My birthday, the name of his old company. He told me last week that he was considering selling the house and moving into a retreat community. One Vanessa found. I looked it up. It's more like a holding facility." Elaine's stomach twisted. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to stop her, but I don't know how." Elaine stood by the window, the dawn light casting long shadows across the floor. The waves in the distance were calm, but her hands trembled like they used to, back when she was hiding behind marble pillars at a wedding reception. "I know how," she said. Over the next few weeks, Elaine became something she hadn't been in years, vigilant. She coached Lila on what to watch for, patterns, phrases, isolating behavior, unexplained financial moves, emotional manipulation disguised as caregiving. Lila was sharp. She recorded conversations subtly, gathered financial documents from the recycling bin, convinced a bank teller to reprint a transaction history. Vanessa had moved more than $40,000 from joint accounts into a trust, which didn't exist. Elaine passed the information to Claire, who had since become her unofficial partner in quiet justice. They opened a case, gathered statements, and moved faster than Rachel ever imagined possible. It didn't reach trial. Vanessa backed off once confronted with the evidence. Lila's father was evaluated independently, no signs of dementia, just over-medicated on supplements and calming herbs. Vanessa had been sneaking into his tea. Elaine didn't meet Lila in person. She didn't need to. But one morning, she received a package. Inside was a bouquet of wildflowers, a handwritten note, and a small seashell painted with the words, "You saved my family. Thank you. Lila." Elaine placed the shell on her windowsill. That evening, she poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir and walked onto the deck. The sun was lowering itself gently into the Pacific, casting gold and crimson across the waves. She sat in her chair, blanket across her lap, wineglass in hand. There was no Rachel in her mind now, no echoes of betrayal, no bitterness in her chest, just quiet and strength. Nathan would be visiting next week. They'd started hiking together, slowly rebuilding not just trust, but shared experiences. He was dating again, a nice girl this time. No red flags, just long walks, shared playlists, and healing. Elaine had finally stopped waiting for the next ambush. Instead, she had started preparing others to defend themselves. She didn't see herself as a hero, but maybe just maybe, she had become a warning light, the one that flickers quietly in the corner of someone's eye, reminding them that love must never come at the cost of dignity. As the last light dipped beneath the ocean, Elaine raised her glass in a silent toast to second chances, to women who refused to disappear, to those who had been hurt, but not broken, to the truth. And then she whispered the words she'd once written in a journal, but never shared aloud. Love is not surrender. Forgiveness is not forgetting. And clarity is the greatest gift of age.